Okay, so we have already discussed about the objects of Satipatthana, right? So body, feeling, consciousness, and the Dhammas. Yeah. We have also discussed about the Satipatthana instruction, which basically is a method of noting with mindfulness in order to develop this accurate clarity, sampajanya, especially the clarity consisting of vipassana insight that discerns nature, impermanent, suffering, non-self. So insight that leads to liberation. We also discuss about Anicca samadhi, or this moment-to-moment concentration, which is necessary for the development of vipassana. So today we'll return to talk about object, but in relation to development of insight. So the four objects of Satipatthana, so we mentioned earlier, they are basically mental physical nature. So body is physical nature, rupa. Then the Vedana and Chitta, they are nama, dhamma, mental nature. So dhamma, they are both mental and physical nature. So basically they are just mental physical nature, nama-rupa dhamma. And in our practice, we note this mental physical nature in order to develop insight into the nature, impermanent, suffering, non-self. Okay? So so in practical meditative experience, this mental physical nature, they appear as just this bare physical mental qualities, mental nature that are present with each moment of sense experiences. Okay? So like the nature of hardness, softness, heat, cold, support, pressure, so on. The knowing, the noting, feeling, and so on. Okay? So this mental physical nature that arise each moment of seeing, hearing, smelling, and so on. Six sense experiences. So this mental physical nature, they are also called sabbhava lakkhana. So natural characteristic or unique characteristic. But we cannot discern this mental physical nature right from the beginning of our practice, especially for beginners. Someone who is completely new to the practice, they don't even have any idea what is nama-rupa. Okay? So we ask them to note nama-rupa, they'll be confused. What is it? Okay? So we begin with something that is already familiar to everybody. Concepts. Okay? So everybody is familiar with concepts. Even a small baby or born already know concepts, right? Father, mother, yeah, concepts. Right? Yeah. Yeah, so the basic instruction also, it instruct us to note objects rising, falling. Rising, falling actually is a concept. Concept of direction, up, down, up, down. In a walking meditation, note the steps, going up, going forward, coming down. These are also concepts, direction. Okay? So we start the practice by noting this concept. Right? This is the first object. Right? Then you patiently work, apply the basic method of noting. What is the basic method of noting? Anupassana. Right? So continuous, precise noting with ardent effort. So you apply this basic method and note. Not rising, falling, not lifting, pushing, placing, lifting, pushing, placing. Okay? So you note in order to develop a continuous mindful noting. Okay? So you have to make effort, note continuously, note, moment to moment to moment. Make effort, not precisely. Okay? Exactly in the present. So you note continuously, so that gradually this continuous mindful noting you build up to establish the Anicca samadhi, the moment to moment samadhi. Okay? So gradually, as the samadhi develops, as you note rising, falling, when the mind clear enough due to samadhi, so the physical qualities starts to become clearer and clearer. So you begin to notice nature support, pushing, the pressure, tightness, right? So the contraction, deflation, and so on. So this becomes clear every moment. You notice this physical nature, the rupa sabhava, material nature. And then as you continue to develop further, so when the mind becomes sensitive enough, clear enough, you begin to notice also the mental nature. Every time you note, you're not rising, you're not pushing, you notice there's the noting mind. There's something, a quality of noting, taking note, or the quality of knowing. So every time you notice, first you notice the material nature, pushing. So then after that, the mental nature that follows the object. So you notice as pushing, as a noting, pushing and noting, pushing and noting. Or pushing and knowing, pushing, knowing, pushing, knowing. Then you start to discern clearly each one, each pushing. You can see each pushing clearly. At some point you keep noting, begin to realize each pushing is a new pushing. separate from the other pushing. Pushing, then another one, another pushing. The first and the second is a different one. The second is a new one, and then the third one, another new one, separate from the other two. The pushing, each one is a new, separate pushing. And then the mental nature also. You can see the pushing, knowing, you begin to realize also at some point you keep noting when it's clear enough, when seen clearly enough, the mind will realize each knowing also new, new and separate. Even in one moment of noting also, the pushing and the knowing is two different nature, separate from each other. So when the mind realizes this, each dhammas, each mental, each physical nature, every moment is new, separate. The nature is separate, does not mix, even though they arise together. So the mind, the knowledge is clear enough to discern clearly their different nature. So with this, when you realize this, and you dispel the view, the wrong view, that there is an unchanging, permanent entity or self or individual in the experience. Every moment you notice as just this momentary nature, dhammas, that's occurring moment to moment, one after another, after another, after another. So you see them very clear cut, separately. So if you have any knowledge of the Dhamma, theoretical knowledge, you know that what we just described is the first insight, nama-rupa paricedanyana. This is a feature of the first insight. You discern clearly every Dhamma, every nama, every rupa Dhamma, every mental, physical nature. Discern them clearly, separately. Each nama, each rupa that arise moment to moment, discern them clearly, separately. That's why it's called nama-rupa pariceda. Jnana. Pariceda means you, how to say? Pariceda. Ceda means like cutting. So, but this is not cutting with a knife, it's with knowledge. So it's like you're slicing. You see each moment, this is one, this is another clearly. Before this, it appears as one continuous thing. So, but once you see clearly, yes, with the knowledge, you see it's not continuous. It's one after another, separately. So that's pariceda. They say delimiting. You delimit them. Delimit means there's a boundary. You see the boundary in between. So you, I delimit my land. This is the boundary of my land. I see. This are the monks, and they set up the sima. This is the limit of the sima. They put the boundary stone. So pariceda means, as you see, this is the limit. This is the limit, this one and then this one, they don't mix. So rupa is see the limit between the two. Nama also, this is called rupa paricheda. You can see one rupa, another rupa, another rupa. It does not mix. Rupa paricheda. Then nama paricheda. You see the knowing, then this knowing, then this knowing. They don't mix. Every moment is a new one. Separate. Okay? Then within each moment of experience also, the object and the mind, okay, and the rupa and the nama also separate. There's nama-rupa paricheda. Okay, so there's rupa paricheda, nama paricheda, and nama-rupa paricheda. So that means it's like, remember that the bowl of bihun. Before that, you see all mixed up rojak together. Nama-rupa paricheda is when you can separate each strand of bihun. Take them out separately. You see them. Each one is a separate bihun. Now, this first insight is actually an important milestone in the development of insight. Okay? So it's a very important milestone. Okay? You cannot skip this. Okay? Because with this insight you arrive at the access door, the gateway to vipassana. Okay? So, because when you arrive at this knowledge, you get the real vipassana object clearly. Okay? It's very clear cut. You get this object. Okay? Before that is all a lot of concepts. Okay? So it's not clear. A lot of all these ideas from the mind mix in. Okay? So now you wash it clean of concept. So you see nama-rupa clearly. You get the vipassana object clearly. Okay? So it's like you have arrived at the access door to vipassana. Okay? Yeah. In fact, the door has been opened for you. Okay? All you need to do is go through. So, do you dare? So it's an important foundation. You cannot skip. It's a foundation because if you, without discerning clearly, each nama, each rupa separately, clearly, you cannot discern each of this nama, each rupa clearly. Yes, discern their nature of impermanent suffering, non-self. Okay? Because if they are all still mixed up together, you cannot see clearly impermanent suffering, non-self. Okay? Just like the bihun, if all mixed together, you cannot see each bihun as a beginning and an end. You cannot tell for sure that they don't go on and on. Very long piece of bihun. Okay? So only when you take it out, it's not that long. It's only 1 inch, beginning end. Now, once the first insight is established, the second insight usually follows closely. Okay? So second insight is Paccaya parigaha jnana. Insight that discern clearly conditioning. Okay? So in this, when experiences second insight, the yogi realize clearly this mental physical nature, they are conditionally arisen. Okay? They do not arise without cause. Very clear one is intention. The walking meditation and daily activities. You are noting clearly. You notice intention. Every time there's intention, there's movement. Intention, movement. Intention, movement. So the mind see this clearly, realize. Because of intention, there's the movement. There's no intention, there's no movement. Okay? When you note object like rising, and you notice the knowing. Okay? When it's clear, you realize. When there's pushing, there's knowing. When there's object, there's knowing. Every time there's object, there's knowing. Or every time there's object, there's noting. Okay? When there's no object, there's no noting, no knowing. Okay? So this second insight is a foundation also. It's a foundation insight. It is foundation for a later development of insight into Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. Okay? You see, when we say insight into dukkha, dukkha means sankhara dukkha. Okay? Suffering due to the nature of conditioning. Okay? Sankhara means dhammas that are conditioned. Formation, they are formed from condition. And there's conditions, suitable condition comes together. They form, they arise, they appear. Okay? That's called formation, sankhara. Okay? And so sankhara dukkha means the suffering of this formation due to their nature of conditioning. And so at the second insight, your yogi begin to discern conditioning clearly. Okay? But not yet discern nature dukkha. Just the conditioning. So this is like you see the firework in the sky. From far away you look, firework in the sky, so nice, so beautiful. Because you not yet discern the danger of this firework, because they are far away. Later on, as the insight develop, you begin to discern the conditioning closer and closer and closer and closer. Then you see this mental physical nature. They are constantly formed by conditioning, constantly arising, disappearing, moment to moment, arising, disappearing, never ending. Okay? It's like you do baking, you have to knead the dough. You press and press and press and press. So your nama-rupa is like being press and press, form and form by conditioning. Okay? It's oppressive. Okay? So this is like going closer and closer and closer to the firework. When you go closer and closer, you start to sense the danger. You start to feel the heat. You start burn repeatedly. Burn you again and again. You feel miserable. Okay? Once a yogi has experience of this first two insight, yogi will have a clear, basic appreciation of the Buddha's teaching of anatta, non-self or not self. Okay? What is anatta? So, before you experience this first two insight, you may have read about anatta from the Dhamma books, from suttas and so on, or you may have heard about it during a Dhamma talk. Okay? So, because you are Buddhist, you accept it out of faith. But you are also a smart person. Your intellect. Right? You think about it, you cannot make sense of anatta. Right? You say no self. I don't exist. How can you say I don't exist? I'm here. How? So you struggle with the idea of no self. Because you always have a sense of a self. There's a self here that exists independently of everything else. Separate from everything else. There's a self here that is experiencing everything. Experiencing, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. Experiencing the world. The self is here, the world is there. You have a sense of this self. Okay? Once you experience the first two insights, you experience clearly. There's no person, no self, no soul. There's only mental, physical nature. Moment to moment, they are just mental, physical nature. There's no continuous self that is present. Just mental, physical nature that are conditionally arisen. That's not independent. But this is still not the full-fledged experience of anatta. Okay, the full-fledged experience of anatta, it comes with the experience of anicca and dukkha. Okay, so this is only experiencing that that's just dhammas. You see clearly, just mental, physical nature present in our experience. Okay, no, there's no person here, just mental, physical nature. And this mental, physical nature, they are not independent or separate. They are conditionally arisen. Without condition, they do not arise. So they are not there all the time. Only when there's condition, they arise. Whereas a self or soul is supposed to be always there, independent of everything else. So moving on from the second insight, as you continue to note all this mental, physical nature. So now that you have got the vipassana object clearly, the mental, physical nature, so you cannot say, okay, finish my job. That's just the beginning. You hardly begin. So you have to note it. You got the object so that you can continue to note it clearly. So you note all this mental, physical nature. Continuously note, moment to moment. Object knowing, object knowing, object noting, object noting. Note continuously. Okay? Anupassana. So it's still the same method. Okay? The method don't change. You use this method all the way until you attain arahantship. Okay? Even after that, even the arahants also still practice satipatthana. They do so in order to attain go into this phala samapatti, attainment of fruition, where the mind experience nibbana, the peace of nibbana. And so you still the same method, no special method. Sometimes yogis ask, Ante, is there a special method now that I've come to this stage? No special method, only one method. This is the only way. Ekayano. So you keep noting. So as you keep noting, as mental, physical nature become clearer and clearer. Okay? Then you start to begin to discern changes in this sabhava, in this mental, physical nature more clearly. Okay? Start to notice they are not static, they are changing. Physical nature become intense and weaken. You see a pressure start weak, then become more and more intense. Then after that weaken again. It changes. Okay? So you notice these changes. Okay? And if you keep noting the change, there come a point when the mind is clear enough, sharp enough. Then you begin to discern each mental, each physical nature. How every moment you notice they arise. As soon as they arise, you begin to diminish, and then disappear completely. Okay? And so they arise, they diminish, and then disappear. Okay? And so each mental, physical nature noted. You notice they arise and diminish and then disappear. Okay? And so it has a beginning, arising. In the middle, it starts to diminish. And then the end, it disappear completely. Okay? So this nature is always there. It's always been there. It's just that earlier insight is not clear. You do not discern them clearly. So you do not pay attention and realize it. Okay? But as you continuously note the change, you will begin to notice each mental, each physical nature that are noted. Arise, disappear. Okay? So arise and then change and then disappear. Okay? This is called Sankhata Lakkhana. Okay? And Sankhata Lakkhana means the nature, the characteristic of the condition. Okay? Dhammas that are conditioned, they have this nature. Sankhata Lakkhana. Okay? So, because it's conditioned, and the suitable condition come together, they arise. And once they arise, they cannot remain. They start to change, diminish, and then finally disappear. Okay? So what is it that arise, and diminish and disappear? It's the sabhava, the mental, physical nature. Okay? So that's why you must discern the mental, physical nature clearly first. Okay? That's why the first insight is very important. You must get this object clear first. Then only, as you continue to note, then only you begin to discern each one arise, diminish, disappear. Okay? You cannot even get the object clearly. How do you see it arising, disappearing clearly? Right? That's why you cannot skip the first insight. Okay, so this Sankata Lakkhana. So there are 3 of them. So Buddha talked about this in the Sankata Lakkhana Sutta. It's in the Tikka Nipata Pali Anguttara Nikaya, the book of the trees in the Anguttara Nikaya. Okay? So Buddha says, Tinimani bhikkhave Sankatassa Sankata Lakkhanani. So in the bhikkhus, there are these 3 characteristics of things that are conditioned. Okay? So katamani tini, what are the 3? Upado panyayati, that's the first one. It's arising, is evident. You can discern, it's arising. So every time object arises, you note carefully, you can see it arising. You see the sound? Can you discern it's arising? You pay careful attention. You see it arising. Before that, now there's no sound. Okay? Where's the sound? Not yet. Because the condition haven't come. The sound is not hiding somewhere in here. Not anywhere. But when the condition comes, the finger strike, then it arises. See? So when there's condition, it arises. It's arising is evident. Can be discerned. Okay? So a yogi who is paying attention, and the mind is sharp and clear, he can discern. Every time an object arises, you notice the very first moment it arises. So before that, it cannot find anywhere. Okay, and then suddenly it appears. Okay, so you're not rising. You see, appear. So upado panyayati, arising is evident. Then vayo panyayati, the second, its disappearance also. It's evident. Okay, you see, gone. You pay attention, you can catch the very moment when it breaks apart, disappear completely. It vanish. Okay, gone. Disappearance is more difficult because it's more subtle. Arising is gross, easy to discern. Okay? Disappearance is more subtle. Okay? That's why you usually discern arising first, before disappearing. Okay? Then the third one, titassa anyatatam panyayati. Okay? So titassa means, tita means when it's present. Okay, so this object arise, and then it disappear. Yes, so from the moment it arise until it disappear, in between, there's the moment of presence. This object is present. Okay, present object means the object is in either arising or remaining, the moment of present, or when it disappears, until the moment it disappears. Okay. So titassa means the middle, when it still remain. Okay. They say beginning, middle, end. The titta means the middle. Okay. In Abhidhamma they say upada titi banga. Upada arising. Titi means remain, present. Okay? Banga means dissolve, dissolution. Completely disappear. So every metaphysical nature goes through this three phases when it is present. So titassa anyatatam. So when it's present, so it arises and remain present for a bit, right? So, but while it remains present, it does not remain still. Okay, it does not remain the same. It changes. Okay, the moment it arises, it starts to diminish, go towards dissolution. Okay, so anyatatam means change. Anyata, anya means something else. Okay, so it becomes something else. It change. So the change, while it remains, is going towards dissolution, is also evident. You hear the sound? Each one writing, go, then no more. Okay? So these are the three. Imani kopika vetini sankatasa sankata lakanani. So these are the three characteristic of things that are conditioned. Okay? So once the sankata lakana, the conditioned nature arising, disappearing is clear, okay? Then what do you do? Same method. Continue to note. Okay? As you continue to note, gradually you begin to realize the universal characteristic, samanya lakkhana, the nature of impermanent suffering, non-self. Okay? So it's systematic, okay? Step by step. First concept, and from concept is a stepping stone to the sabbhava, metaphysical nature. Okay? Then that is a stepping stone to sankata lakkhana, the conditioned nature, the arising, disappearing. And this is the stepping stone. Come finally to the universal characteristic. Okay, so now we'll discuss about this universal characteristic. So there are three universal characteristics. Okay, or sometimes they say common characteristic. Okay, so unlike sabbhava lakkhana is unique characteristic. Okay, so it's unique to each mental or physical nature. Okay, so each mental physical nature have their own unique nature. Right? Earth element, hardness, fire element, heat. Okay? Citta, consciousness is knowing, huh? And so on. Okay, this is called Sabbhava Lakkhana. Unique characteristic or specific characteristic. Okay? So Samanya Lakkhana is common characteristic or universal characteristic. That means they are common to all mental physical nature. So all mental physical nature has this common characteristic of impermanent suffering, non-self. Okay? Okay. Now first, discuss about Anicca. So impermanent. So the first question: what is it that is anicca? What is it that is impermanent? Okay? So the answer, I think by now you should know. 5 aggregates. In the Radha Samyutta, Samyutta Nikaya, Anicca Sutta. So in that sutta, the Venerable Radha, he approached the Buddha, and put forward this question to the Buddha. He says, Aniccam aniccanti bante uccati katamanuko bante aniccanti. So he asks, say anicca, anicca, anicca. Everybody say anicca. Buddhists always say anicca, anicca. So you lose something, anicca. Something that belong to you, spoil, break apart, or anicca. So his question, people say anicca, anicca. So he asks, what is it, Bante, that is anicca? He asked the Buddha. So you see, you notice he addressed Buddha as Bante. In Buddha's time, the monks address Buddha as Bante, when directly speaking to the Buddha. Okay, but they refer to the Buddha in the third person also, as Bhagawa. Bhagawa means what? Usually they translate it as what? The Blessed One. But actually this is what do you call it? An epithet for your teacher. So in the Indian spiritual tradition, you address your teacher as the Bhagawa, the teacher. Okay? So in a commentary also explain Bhagawa as Garu, that means Guru, teacher. Okay, so the Blessed One actually means the teacher, the great teacher. Okay? So the monks in the Buddha's time, may the Bhagawa teach the Dhamma. Bhagawa Dhammam Desetu. So actually the Buddha is right in front of them. Okay? But they refer to him in the third person as a form of respect. You're not third person in grammar. First person is yourself. So second person is the person you are speaking directly to. Third person is the person you are talking about. So not directly. So he asks, Bhante, what is it that is anicca? Okay? So the Buddha replied, Rupam ko radha anicca, Vedana anicca, Sanya anicca, Sankhara anicca, Vinyanam anicca. Okay? So materiality is impermanent, it's anicca. Feeling is impermanent, perception impermanent, mental formation impermanent, consciousness impermanent. That means the five aggregates impermanent. It's the five aggregates that are impermanent. So whenever Buddha talk about anicca, so it's referring to the five aggregates. Okay, and sometimes also the salayatana, six sense base, or the dhatu, the elements, 18 elements, which basically is just mind, the base, and the object. Okay? These are all dhammas, mental, physical dhamma. So nama-rupa dhamma, natural realities. Okay? So they are not concepts. Okay? Not a person, not a thing. So Buddha did not say a person is impermanent, although it is impermanent. Okay? But it's a concept. What is actually impermanent in the ultimate sense? This mental, physical nature. So in practice, if you want to develop insight into anicca, you need to note this mental, physical nature that are arising continuously every moment, and through the six sense based experience. Okay? So by noting them, then you can develop insight into the nature of impermanent. Okay, so how do you know that the five aggregates are impermanent? So when you are noting five aggregates, you are noting this mental, physical nature. How do you know that they are impermanent? What are the characteristic marks or signs of these aggregates that tells you that they are impermanent? So this is explained in the commentary. Hutva abhavadena anicca. Okay? So it is impermanent in the sense of disappearance upon arising. Okay? So hutva abhavadena. Okay? Hutva means coming into existence. So arising, upon appearing, upon arising, coming into existence. Abhava, disappear. Okay, so so that disappearance upon arising. Okay? That is the nature. That's the characteristic of impermanent That is the sign of impermanent. Okay? So, not the arising, the disappearance. Okay? But because the arising is tied up with the disappearance also. So, therefore, the arising and disappearing are both the nature of impermanent. So that disappearance, when we say disappearance, it means completely disappear. Okay? So, like the sound. See? Where is the sound now? Cannot find it anywhere. So, it's nowhere to be found because it's completely disappear, vanish. Okay? So, so when we say anicca, it means completely disappear, nothing remain. Okay, it's not that something still remain. Like if a piece of glass break into pieces, it still remain the pieces of glass. Okay, not like this. Okay, impermanent means that nature completely disappear. Okay? No. So it's impermanent in the sense that disappearance, complete disappearance upon arising. Okay? So that complete disappearance, that is anicca. That is the characteristic of anicca. This you can find also in the, for example, in the Anupada Sutta, in the Majjhima Nikaya. Okay, so in this sutta, the Buddha described how Venerable Sariputta, when he was striving to attain arahantship, how he experienced this insight. Okay? So Venerable Sariputta's method of practice is yuganada. That means he goes into each jhana, first jhana, second jhana, and so on. Okay, so he goes enter into each jhana, and then he quickly withdraw from it, and then he contemplate, note all the jhana factors, the jhana citta, all the mental states comprising that jhana. Okay, note them and see their nature, impermanent, suffering, non-self. Then he quickly enter second jhana and come out, and again note vipassana. So samatha, then go out vipassana, and go in again samatha. Second jhana, come out vipassana, no, impermanent, suffering, non-self, and quickly go in third jhana, come out again. So in this way he go all the jhanas. Let's call yuganada, the method of yoking together. That means vipassana, samatha and vipassana yoke together. This one, very extraordinary person only can practice this. Okay, ordinary person, vipassana also like want to die already. So he can handle both samatha and vipassana together. That's his method. So the Buddha described how he experienced. So when he's noting the nature, when he's practicing vipassana on the jhana, and noting all these mental states, all the jhana factors, the jhana citta. So Buddha described his experience. He say, ahutva sambonti, hutva pativenti. Okay, so that means all these factors, all these jhana factors, one at a time, of course. He says, ahutva sambonti. Okay, so not having existed before, they arise. Okay, So earlier it was not there. Okay, now where to be found? And then they arise. Okay, when there is condition, they arise. Okay, so before that, cannot be found anywhere. And when the condition is right, they just appear. It's like appearing from the thin air, as they said. Okay? And then hutva pativenti. Okay? So having come into existence, having arisen, okay, they vanish, completely disappear. Pativenti. Okay? So that's how Venerable Sariputta experienced impermanence. Okay? So whatever that arises, when it noted, you see, disappear, vanish instantaneously, completely disappear. So that complete disappearance itself, that is the true characteristic of anicca. Okay? That disappearing. Okay? And so it's by noting the disappearing again and again, experiencing clearly the nature of anicca, lakkhana, the characteristic anicca, that the yogi can come to realize eventually nature of anicca. Okay? They keep noting everything not disappear, everything not disappear, disappear. Okay? And when the mind note this long enough, spontaneously realize the impermanence of everything. Okay? So in order to discern this characteristic anicca, the disappearance upon arising, first the yogi must discern clearly the rise and fall. Clearly, rise and fall of this mental or physical nature. That means the sankhata lakkhana, conditioned nature must be clear, the arising, disappearing. So if we fail to discern the sankhata lakkhana clearly, then this mental physical process always appear continuous, because you cannot discern the arising and disappearing within this process. So they appear as just one continuous, non-changing process. Like bending an arm. You think you don't know properly, you don't see the moment to moment arising, disappearing. You think it's just one arm, the same arm throughout. The same in the beginning, same in the middle, same arm in the end. And then you identify, this is my arm. And you also think that I am bending. I am bending. This same person, I, behind this bending, from beginning, middle, end, is the same person causing this bending of the arm, of the same arm. So, but if you're with clear knowledge, especially like during the first insight, in the first insight you listen, it's not continuous. It is a series of bending, bending. You feel the sensation, bending, it's like pulling, pushing up. So you, so there's just a series of this material nature, each one new, each bending, the new one, another new one, another new one, another one, another one. Each one separate from the previous. So when you note like this again and again, you realize there's no continuous, there's no arm there. The idea of continuous arm disappear. Okay, there's only a series of momentary physical nature. Okay? Then the second insight, you also notice, you begin to notice the intention behind the bending. You notice, because the intention, bending occur. Another intention, bending again. Another intention, bending. Okay? So when you note clearly, you see also this intention. Each intention is a different intention. It's a new intention. Intention, bending. Another intention, new one, bending. Another intention. Each one is new, separate from the previous. Then you note this clear enough, you realize there's no person behind the bending. There's just a series of mental nature, the intention, one after another. But during the second insight, the disappearance of the intention, disappearance of the bending is not clearly discerned yet. Okay? So actually, second insight you only see arising. Okay? First insight you don't even see arising. You see the arising, present, and the disappearing. First insight you just catch the middle, the moment of presence. First insight you cannot discern clearly at the very first moment when each the bending arises. Okay? So you catch it somewhere in the middle only. Okay? But that's enough for you to see that each one is separate. So by the second insight you only see the arising clearly. Okay? When the intention arises, the bending arises, and you see both arise together, arise. But before you can see the disappearance clearly, as we said just now, disappearance is more subtle. Okay? Arising is more gross, easier to discern. So the second insight you see arising, but before you can see it disappearing, another intention arise, together with another bending arise. Okay? So you see the object arise, before you can see disappear, something else arise. Okay? So you just keep seeing arising, arising, arising. So because you cannot discern yet the disappearance, that means you have not seen clearly the characteristic of anicca. Okay, so therefore here still not fully convinced of anicca. So the perception of anicca is not yet established yet, not yet a reason, because you haven't seen the disappearance clearly. So what do you do? Anupassana. Keep noting. So keep noting. The mind becomes sharper, sharper, clearer, clearer. Then at some point when sharp enough, then you begin to see clearly the disappearance. Okay? And the third insight, samasana jnana. Yogi begin to discern each mental, each physical nature. As noted, that arise and then slowly diminish and then disappear. Okay? So there's not a single mental or physical nature as that remain. Every time you note anything, finally it will disappear. Okay? So here the yogi begin to discern the characteristic of anicca. Okay, the disappearance start to appear clearly. Okay, so that means anicca sanya, the perception of anicca is established. Okay, that as you keep noting, okay, because samasana jnana at first is very slow. It arise, it takes its sweet time before it disappears. Okay, because the mind is still not precisely in the present yet. Okay, so they keep noting, the mind sharper and sharper and sharper, and come closer and closer to the present moment. Okay, so as it comes closer and closer, you see the change arising, disappearing, accelerate. It goes faster, 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 until it comes to the Udayabaya jnana, the fourth insight. It's so fast that the moment you note it, arises, it disappears. Okay, so mind is right in the present. The moment you note it arises, it disappears. Okay, so the Udayabaya is so fast that even the moment of presence cannot be discerned anymore. Okay, just the moment it arises, in that moment it just vanish, disappear. Okay, so so the perception of impermanent becoming clearer. Okay, so and then again anupassana, keep noting. Okay, it goes faster still, faster, 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 until you come to the next insight, Bhanga jnana, knowledge of dissolution. So fast that even the arising cannot be discerned anymore. The moment the yogi note, it's just the disappearing, disappearing, disappearing. Okay, the object and the mind disappearing, disappearing. Okay, so often the yogi don't even know what is it, because it's just disappearing. Okay, this is where the concept totally disappear. Okay, because once you do not discern arising anymore, concept cannot form. Okay, it's just disappearing. Okay? To form concept, you must see the arising. Okay, so now it's just disappearing. Even the nature actually becomes not clear. The sabhava, because it's just disappearing. So beginning from Bhanga jnana onwards, this perception of anicca is firmly established. Okay, so because the mind is actually going straight to the characteristic of anicca, the disappearing. Every time you note, it's just disappearing, disappearing. Go straight to anicca. So the anicca sanya, the perception of anicca, is firmly established. And it will only get stronger from that point onwards. So once anicca sanya is firmly established, nicca sanya, perception of permanence, is shaken and abandoned, given up. So the habit of grasping after the experience as permanent is completely abandoned. So in the earlier insight, this habit of grasping at permanent is still there. It's still perceived and nicca, even though like samasana jnana, udayabaya jnana, you already perceive anicca, but the habit of grasping after permanence is still very strong. So only at Bhanga jnana, and the mind goes straight, every time it goes straight to the impermanence, the disappearing. Then only this strong perception of nicca, permanence, is given up completely. So the Anicca Lakkhana, the characteristic Anicca, is impressed strongly in the mind. So the fact and truth of Anicca sink in and transform the way the mind perceives the world from deep within the heart. So once you see Anicca more and more clearly like this, so it transforms your view of the world. You no longer expect things to remain the same all the time. You don't expect eternal happiness anymore. Otherwise, you see, people in the world are chasing after eternal happiness, whether they know it or not. So, once you experience this insight clearly, you let go of the illusion and the false hope of permanence. You surrender to impermanent. Perceive clearly. There's no continuity of experience. Everything disappears the instant they arise. So the world of experience is in a state of unstable flux. The world of experience is vanishing moment to moment to moment. It's from this that the dukkha jnana, insight into dukkha, will arise. Because this seeing impermanent means you're seeing death again and again. So it's horrifying. So this continuous noting of Anicca Lakkhana, the characteristic of Anicca. You keep noting the disappearance again and again. Arising, disappearing, arising, disappearing. This is called Anicca Nupassana. A continuous noting of Anicca. And this will lead to the insight into Anicca. Anicca Nupassana Jnana. Okay, we stop here.